This episode of Around the Layout is brought to you by Spring Creek Model Trains. Family owned for nearly 25 years, Spring Creek is your destination for model trains. Check out springcreekmodeltrains.com for a wide variety of offerings from today's top manufacturers and exclusive products found nowhere else. Whether in Deschler, Nebraska, or at a train show near you, stop in and say wow. To see where they'll be next, visit their website at springcreekmodeltrains.com. If you're looking to bring more realism to your layout industries, look no further than tullymodels.com, the home of Southern Tier Grain Modeler Supply and Steel Mill Modeler Supply. With models to fit steam, transition, and diesel eras, Kevin Tully has you covered with all of the components you'll need to take your grain and steel mills to the next level. Check out the entire catalog at tullymodels.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arda. So glad you could join us. It's time once again. Wait a minute. We've already done the What's Happening show already.
But this is an extra one because this is something different. It's something unique. The holiday season is coming up. I want to talk about a book, and you're going, oh, here we go. He's going to promote a White River. No. We're going to talk about a book from a model railroad manufacturer.
Wild.
Isn't that something? Yeah, something different. And not their first. Not their first. They've done several books. So yeah, what are you going to call the show then?
I don't know. What's happening at the library?
Club? Maybe a book club.
Maybe something like that.
Like that.
Well, tell us more. Who do you got?
None other than Mr. Model Railroading himself, Jason Shron of Rapido Trains up in Canada is with us today. Jason, how you doing today?
Okay, how's it going?
It's going pretty well.
Beauty.
How's your railroad going? I always enjoy seeing the updates and pictures of your railroad.
Well, I started working on Gilwood Station about a year and a half ago, and I'm still working on Gilwood Station. So the lesson that I've learned is selective compression is a good thing. My Gilwood Station is not at all selectively compressed. So I recently made 14 actual feet of chain link fence to go between the tracks. And that's one of the 3 fences I have to build for this station. So as you can tell, it's taken a while. It'll hopefully look good when it's done. Right now, it's a mess.
Awesome. Well, what I want to talk about today, I mean, you guys are always like the P32s that you just announced. There's always so much product coming out from Rapido, NHO and N-Scale.
And occasionally we ship stuff too.
And you do. Oh, you do. Yes. But the books, one of my favorite books is that turbo book you did on the UA Turbo. Yes. That was packaged in that first one, because it's such a nice, it's a little soft cover book, if you've not seen it, Ray, that goes through the whole history of the United Aircraft, Sikorsky, if I'm saying it right, that built that. And the pictures and things they did in it. There's one shot of like an artist rendering of an Illinois Central turbo, and it says like Springfield, which I guess would be Springfield, Illinois, with the old split rail IC. My head literally exploded as I turned the page and saw that, like, oh, wow.
Yeah. There's a lot of cool stuff when I was doing research for that book. I even found Bud had proposed their own turbo.
Wow.
But it was not an aircraft that won out. And we sold, including the ones with the models, we sold about 6,000 copies of that book. Wow. And to be a bestseller in Canada, you only have to sell 5,000 copies. To be fair, most of my sales were in the United States. So, that book, I wrote that in a week. I wrote it in 2007, and then I spent 3 months designing the book and everything. So I said to my wife, who's a writer, she's a writer by profession, she's got several books published by real publishers, not by model train companies. And I said, it just took me a week to write the book. She said, no, you've been writing that book your entire life. It took you a week to put it down on paper, but you've been writing that book. And she's right. I've been amassing all the documentation for years and years and years. When it came to put it together, I just sort of went to my parents' house for a week. So I was away from my kids, and I was away from the office. I just wrote a book. But now I wish I had the time to do something like that.
It seems like such a natural to me. I mean, a model railroad company, because you're doing the research.
Yes.
I mean, when they're talking behind the scenes on projects and, asking for prototype pictures and other things, that's what I connect that because of my publishing work that I do of, wow, this would be a great book. So whether it's like when your C30-7 came out and we're going through all those pictures, I'm like, this would make a wonderful softcover book on these things. So it seems like such a natural, yet I can't think of any other hobby company that is printing books on things. I mean, this is a innovative and novel idea, and kudos to you guys for having done a handful of these. And that's why I wanted to promote this one.
On the Canadian Tempo trains, those were Canadian national trains from the 60s to Via Rail in the 80s. They ended up on the ski train, and then they ended up back in Canada. We did a book, recently published a book on the history of Via Rail Canada, like a really gorgeous hardcover one called People Moving People, written by Kevin Holland, a gentleman you may have some passing.
I do know Kevin.
And then we also we published a book on the British Advanced Passenger Train. That was when we were making British trains out of our North American office. Now that we make British trains over the UK office, they've got a whole bunch of books they've been doing. Usually they include free with models. Books. It's really cool. But now, the new book that I want to talk to you about today is the book I always wished I'd had. Simple as that. I grew up, born in Montreal, moved to Toronto, and went back and forth on the train all the time. And I became obsessed with Via Rail Canada's equipment. Specifically, my turbo train was my favorite train, but also the various ex-Canadian National cars that they purchased. We called them the blue and yellow cars, to the point where I'm now the president of the Via Historical Association, and we're working with Via to create a heritage train for the 50th anniversary in 2028. But I remember walking into a hobby shop in Montreal when I was, 10 or 11. And they had a copy of Rail Canada Volume 4 by Don Lewis, Launchpad Distributors, and the late Don Lewis. And it had drawings of all these Via Rail cars. And what he had done is he'd taken the Canadian National had their internal documentation with drawings of all the cars from 1968 or so, and then the Upper Canada Railway Society reproduced it. He took those drawings, did his own measurements, and did new drawings of them, etc., along with painting notes. It was a very black and white, very early 80s, if you can imagine. Those the book that I had to rebind mine because it fell apart because I had and I remember seeing that book and being so wowed, but what it was missing was color photos. It had a handful, but that was it. It was missing good quality reproductions. It was missing really detailed history on the equipment, especially as I became a more serious modeler. When I was 13, I started scratch building underbody equipment and detailing cars. And then I took a pause, 15 to 20, like most guys did. We was busy chasing after girls in high school, but then got back into the hobby around the age of 19 or 20 and got really serious into what does all this stuff do, this air conditioning equipment, the battery boxes, et cetera. And then when I started Rapido, the first models we brought out were the Canadian National Coach and the E-Series Duplex Sleeper, which, and I've told you many times how I was stuck underneath the car, minus 20 below or whatever. It was really cold, and I'm measuring all these doodads and thingamabobs. And then I just, through designing all these passenger cars, I became very familiar with things like Jenna motors, the OK series Jenna motors, with the battery boxes, with the train air conditioning, with the Frigidaire air conditioning, with the Westinghouse D22 brake system, with the Nord 26C, all these different things I just learned about and how the cars worked. And I would have loved to had this type of information put together in one place. So it's not just a list of all the cars. It's not just pretty pictures, but it's like a drilled down history of when these cars were ordered, who built these cars, how they were modified over the course of their lives, what they, and I have to tell you that before I brought out my first model, I went to my friend Richard Longpre. Richard is a very good friend of mine. He was worked for Canadian Pacific for many, many years. He drove the Montreal commuter trains. He drove CP freights. He then retired and then worked for Via Rail, driving Via trains. So he's got a 30-odd year relationship on the railroad. And Richard is just as passionate, I'd say even more passionate about these cars than I am, to the point where he and his brother started a business when Via had to dispose of hundreds of cars in the 1990s following the drastic government cuts. He and his brother ended up buying 84 cars. And they were able to save a few. Unfortunately, Via took the trucks off of most of the cars that they sold. and they gave Richard and his brother, they'd sell them 30 cars and say you have to have them all off the property in 30 days. So he had to deal with a car a day.
Wow.
So he and his brother took apart, they were able to save some cars, but the vast majority, they had no choice but to scrap. Nobody wanted to buy these cars. They had no trucks on them, so you could not, they were on shop trucks. You couldn't even move them off the property. And I remember him telling me how it broke his heart where Via had, after 1985, the same government that later cut Via in 1990 had reinstated some services. So Via took some cars out of mothballs and did like a top to bottom renovation, including electrical, new paneling, new paint, new upholstery, new everything. And then Richard got these cars and said, you have a day. You got to get rid of this, right? And it was heartbreaking. This beautiful Pullman Standard 10.5 sleeper that had been serviced since 1954 and was fully rebuilt inside and out. Richard estimates 10,000 hours went into each car to restore it via in Montreal's Point St. Charles shops, and he had to scrap it. So he had to go through the car, taking out light fixtures, whatever he could, doors, light fixtures, coat hooks, hardware, etc. But he had no choice. He had to scrap the car. And that was just heartbreaking. So he's loved these cars, and he's having scrapped these cars. He knows them really down to the rivets, inside and out. He can tell you what's between the floors. I know what's underneath the car and what's inside the car. He'll tell you what's between underneath the car and inside the car. And so he was this is something that he's had a lifelong dream to write this book. And this is just volume 1. It's going to be at least 3 volumes. I'm going to flip through the pre-production copy. I think it's about 300. Yeah, it's 300 pages, over 400 images. The whole book is full color. Obviously, a lot of the images are builder's photos from the 50s, so they're black and white. But he also includes consists that he's recorded and the friends of his have recorded over the years, so you know where the car would have been marshaled in a train. And you think 300 pages, and he's only dealing from cars in the number series 100 to 517, whereas Via had cars up into the in the extreme, the 16,000s. Wow. So they skipped a lot of numbers. Don't worry, they didn't have that many cars. The XCP equipment had very long, very high numbers. So 517 is the Skyline used in the Canadian. The 100 series are the coaches on the Canadian. So you got the 2 series of cars that are still in service on the Canadian today. But then it includes the cars from the Tempo, and it includes Dinette cars that were XCN. And it's just I'm blown away by the kind of stuff I'm looking at here. And he's got drawings, interior blueprints for every car style, including variations. So, for example, when they modified the coaches to be a parlor, he's got the layout of the parlor. And a lot of this is not just Via Rail. I mean, these cars joined Via Rail in 1978, but a lot of them were retired anywhere from 1982 to 1992, 93, 96. And then obviously the stainless steel ones are still in service today. So his history goes right back to when these cars were built. So it's a history of the cars as CN cars and as CP cars. So, for example, the Dome cars were Delaware and Hudson leased them for a while for the Adirondack. He's got photos. He's got everything. I mean, it's it's spectacular.
Sounds. I mean, we just did a new Amtrak by the Numbers 2. And I think out of all of the recent White River books, that's the one I hear the most feedback on because it is such a reference piece. And when I first heard of this, I'm like, this sounds like it's going to be the Canadian equal to that rundown of Amtrak's passenger equipment, which is spectacular.
But it dials it up to 11.
Wow.
Because, Amtrak with its huge fleet, you would have needed like 15 volumes to do the kind of detail that he's doing in this book. And it's just such a gorgeous book. I'm often asked to read over books for people, and I'll often look through them or whatever. This one, I was sending him, because Richard's English is a second language, so I'm sending him grammar corrections on things like that. There were surprisingly few. His English is very, very good, but I was it was. All I could say is a work of art, and just like Kevin's book, People Moving People, the two of them, I think, I certainly of all the books that Rapido has been involved with, these are the two that I'm the proudest of. Even though I wrote one of the books, that was ages ago, but that was, like you said, it's a soft cover book. It was a small thing. This is always like a magnum opus Wow. And Richard spent, he estimates he spent about $20,000 in photo acquisition. I mean, he was getting photos from the National Archives. I think he was paying like $50-$60 a photo, right? So Richard's never going to make his money back. Rapido's, we're just going to send money to Richard if we make any money on this. But it's a kind of book that really it's a pleasure to be able to do. Certainly, we're not relying on the book for our year-end financials in terms of whether Rapido is going to be a profitable company or not. You don't sell gorgeous $125 hardcover books by the thousand, but I love it. I hope that we're doing a small print run to start. When we're talking now, it's going to probably be in a couple weeks from now, and we should have them out in time for Christmas. And hopefully it's a book that people, if they have any interest in Canadian passenger trains, I'm hoping they'll put it on their shelf.
And this, we're talking because we haven't gone into some of just the basic details. This is, as Jason said, this is like a coffee table type book, dust jacket, hardcover. I
don't think we decided to go with the dust jacket. I don't remember.
Is it going to be printed color cover?
Yeah, color covers. Yeah. It's I have to ask Richard about that. The samples that we've had have been these laminated board covers, which are and I think this book is going to be referenced so much. A dust jacket is just going to get torn. I know that my Lutke and West CN passenger car books, the dust jackets are all torn on those. I reference them so much. It's fat. I'm sitting on my workbench as I'm talking to you, and I've got a nice little ruler here. It is about 1.25 inches thick. It's 9x12 horizontal format.
I mean, this is just beautiful. As I mentioned, if you're looking for Christmas and holiday gifts this year, I think this is new. And if you've not picked up that People Moving People that Kevin Holland did, that was a spectacular. That copy that you sent me for review, I gave that to Kevin Udaly, and he hadn't seen it. I said, "Gee, Kevin Holland did this book for Rapido Trains." So I hadn't seen it. And he said, "Oh, it's fantastic." I said, "Add it to your library. It is a beautiful book." And so, they're wonderful.
That's the first coffee table history of VIA ever produced. The only history book of VIA that got close was my friend Chris Greenlaw did a book in 2007 or so for motor books on VIA Rail. But Chris is he's a political junkie, so he loves politics. So he was telling all about the creation of VIA. Right. But and I think People really sort of picks up from there. It tells the creation story, but then it continues with the rest of the history of VIA, which is approaching 50 years old. And I mean, there have been some small things, like your typical Morning Sun book is on VIA, which also is a Kevin Holland production. Or there was a very thin soft cover, VIA Rail Canada the first 5 years. That's one where once again, I looked at it so much that it fell apart and completely got unglued, and I ended up having that book in a Manila file folder because that was the only way I could keep it together. So there's very few, and Amtrak too, by the way. We've got these two national railroads which have grown side by side, the United States and Canada. Amtrak formed 71, VIA formed 76 to 78, depending on who you're talking to. And they've got very, very similar stories. They're political footballs. They've been largely hated by the rail fan and railroad press and museum communities. You think about how many pieces of Amtrak equipment just get cut up and nobody wants to save them. It's the same thing with VIA. I mean, we'll take it if we can use it on our tourist line, but otherwise cut it up. It's a shame that you've got these two national railroads which have kept passenger rail alive in North America in what has been almost entirely hostile environment from all levels of, like all shades of government. Let's put it that way: red, blue, or in Canada's also red and blue. But it's like it's been overall generally hostile. And the fact that we still have Amtrak trains going across the country, we still have VIA the Canadian going from Toronto to Vancouver and the ocean from from Montreal to Halifax is actually a miracle when you think of it that way. But look how many books have been written on Amtrak. You put all the Amtrak and VIA books together on a shelf, on the shelf it'll be about the width of my laptop monitor. Okay, and I'm not kidding. That's what it's gonna be about the width of my laptop monitor. So like a foot and a bit. Right?
But do you feel like it's growing? Is it like, because
Yes.
you talk about VIA when you were younger, and I think if I remember the one story I remember you telling one time, your first VIA cars were either the Mantua metal shorties
That was my first VIA cars. And then it was the River Rossi. Oh, also the Lifelike Canada did a VIA set with those old little silver cars they used to sell.
So anybody that looks at the underbody detail on a Rapido passenger car and thinks, wow, this is just amazing, wonder how they got that way. Next time you're at a train show, grab one of those old Mantua or Tyco Streamliners, flip it over. And when you see this shiny, flat, nothing metal underbody, go, this is what drove Jason mad, that there was nothing here but two riveted Talgo trucks on a stainless steel just slab. But yeah, and I was the same. It was Amtrak for me because I was born in 66. Amtrak comes along in 71. I saw the Rainbow era. The French Turboliner ran Chicago, St. Louis, where I grew up. So I kind of have the same thing, but the Amtrak version.
Right.
And my dad's friends, the older rail fans, people like Dave Ingalls and stuff would be like, Amtrak, ugh. Like it's just, it's an insult. And it's like, no, Amtrak's really cool. But do you feel like, are we now hitting, as we're getting a little more seasoned and mature in age, do you feel like our interest, the Amtrak VIA people, is it finally getting some credibility that it's no longer that, oh, who cares it's Amtrak or who cares it's VIA?
So yes, but we've got a real challenge in that there was much more of an interest in railroad preservation 30 years ago than there is now. And insurance now is way higher than it was 30 years ago. So you want to run a tourist railroad, you've got huge costs. And we know there's tourist railroads that are struggling to make ends meet all over North America, and several have gone under. So we're in an environment, and also land is much more expensive. So you've got museums that formed up, for example, outside Montreal when land was cheap and plentiful, and now it's prime real estate, and they haven't got room to save. Well, they'll save a few pieces of equipment, but they haven't got the room or the resources to do much more than just save equipment. So you've got a situation here with we have the will to save Amtrak and VIA equipment, but where are we actually physically going to put it so it doesn't just end up rusting away in a field somewhere? And that's a challenge. If you look at the railroad museums out there, they don't have a whole lot of available real estate to preserve new equipment. If you look at, even go to IRM, which is probably the greatest railroad museum in the world, in some ways, and those tracks are chock-a-block. Yeah. Where all the passenger cars are stored, right, and some of the locomotives. So my fear is that what's not just Amtrak and VIA, but second and third generation diesels in general. How can we save them, and who's saving them? People are reaching out to me and saying, CN's retiring their ST50s, ST60s a while ago, and are now the Dash 8s. Can you get one? It's like, I don't have. Say I could get the funds to purchase a locomotive from CN. Where am I going to put it?
Yeah,
right? I'm very busy with the VIA Historical Association. That's our biggest challenge right now. We're leasing space from VIA's maintenance center. They are rebuilding their maintenance center, and we're now haggling to get 2 more tracks. I was on the phone with them yesterday saying, you want this anniversary train, but we're out of space. We need 2 more tracks because we have 3 VIA coaches and a VIA locomotive that we're ready to move to the maintenance center. Where are we going to put them? Right. So, and that's even with the help of the railroad, there's no space.
Yeah.
So I'm confident we'll get the 2 tracks eventually. But that's a challenge. Where do you put this stuff, and how do you preserve it in a way that it's maintained, ideally undercover? And that's just very, very expensive. Even our equipment, the VHA's equipment, is outside. There's nothing we can do about that. It's outside, and it means that it's outside, exposed to the elements, and we're going to have to keep plugging the leaks and fixing this and fixing that because it's nothing you can do.
When I worked at Union Station, we had the same thing. We had a handful of like Milwaukee Road and a few other cars that we only had so much space under the shed.
Yeah.
But so, yeah, it was what's tarped well enough that it can sit outside while we have this inside being worked on. What can people do? You mentioned that you're the president of the VIA
Yeah, so I started the VIA. So Rapido Trains started when we first started making money. I think our first profitable year was 2014 or 15. And then 2015, I said, that's it. It's time to save some VIA equipment because the museums weren't doing it. So I went out and found a VIA rail sleeper back in the hills of Georgia. I'd been sitting outside for 20 years just rotting. And I foolishly invested money to this because there were other cars in much better shape. But I had a very limited amount of money. I didn't have a lot. Rapido was not that profitable. And slowly that we had, so in 2015, we got Edmondson, the sleeping car. In 2016, found out that a bunch of stored rail diesel cars, but RDCs, were about to be cut up in Moncton, New Brunswick, the East Coast. So we got on a plane, went out there. This time I took Chris Fox, who's a mechanic. I didn't do that the first time. Big mistake. And we found, of all the junk that was parked there, we had one RDC that had just taken out of service a few years earlier and Chris would be able to restore it. So we ended up buying that. We made a website for people to we can't give you a tax receipt. We're not a charity, but please give us money to buy this. And we raised over $30,000 in the space of a couple of weeks. And we had enough to crane up the thing and change the wheel sets and do the COTS and everything. And we actually, it cost about $12,000 to move the RDC to our office to Toronto Maintenance Center. So we moved it from Moncton to Toronto. We got that running. And then VIA had 4 other RDCs on the property. And in the beginning of COVID, they said, we have to get rid of these. Whoever the president at the time wanted them out. So I contacted VIA. He said, well, can you get trailers? I said, how about we buy them and leave them there? He said, okay. So Rapido it's now owned 5 RDCs and a sleeping car. And one of those RDCs was workable. It was 3 were just shells that had been there for many years. And so now we had these 6 pieces of equipment. And of course, my CFO, Janet, was always complaining. It's like, you're throwing our money away. We never have enough money and you're throwing it away. And I said, but we have to save this stuff. So it was my accountant that said, why don't you form a charity called, and then I decided to call the VIA Historical Association, reached out to other like-minded VIA enthusiasts. And about 4 years ago, we started the charity, and then Rapido donated the equipment to the charity. And since then, we can now take donations both in Canada and the US. The US was a big deal. It's a lot of expats in the States. We have a huge donor in the States who's very, very supportive of us, one of our chief donors, and he had to wait till he can get a tax receipt. So now we bought an FP9A locomotive, and it's now been fully repainted back into VIA colors at the Ontario Southland. And we've got 2 day-nighter coaches, a baggage car. We just bought another baggage car and a cafe bar lounge. And we're in negotiations for a dining car. And with our sleeping car, that's sort of the core of our heritage train. And we'll mix that in with VIA's HEP1 transcontinental equipment. So we're upgrading all these cars to HEP1. So 3 of the cars are already upgraded to HEP1. And we have to upgrade the others to HEP1. And that's where most of our money is going to go in the next 3.5 years, is to get these cars upgraded to HEP1 and to clean them up and restore them, refinish them, etc. So we're looking for one more locomotive. We're in negotiations for possibly an FPA4 locomotive with an owner in the United States, a working FPA4 locomotive. So that's a possibility. And so we'll see. We'll see. Nice to have.
And that is, I think that's viahistory.ca.
Yes.
So if you're interested, you want to know more about that VIA Historical Association, which is I assume you can do donations too, as like a gift for somebody too.
Yes, you can donate directly to their website. If you're in the United States and you want to make a larger donation, like talking about, $1,000 and up, contact us and we'll send you to our third-party organization in the United States that accepts those and gives an American tax receipt, because we're a Canadian charity. We can't give an American tax receipt. If you're in Canada and you want to make a donation, a larger one, don't use the online. You could just send us a check or a wire transfer. Would be an easier way to do that, because we don't pay the credit card fees. So yeah, it's and we received a lot of support. We're able to pay our bills, which is good.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's one again with the book publishing, I think is so neat. But then this angle of it too, Ray. When you see these pictures of these guys working on the equipment, I've been seeing that FP9, the paint, as they're masking and doing the yellow nose and the blue. The stuff they do like that is just incredible. And we didn't even talk about buses, but don't start talking about the buses. But it's just, it's Jason, unfortunately, I think has the same collector disease that I have, and there's no cure for it. Luckily, mine is mostly 187th, and he sadly is doing some 1-to-1 as well.
Well, not having the trains on the books is good, but the second bus has been an absolute money pit. And we could have bought the first bus 4 times over with what we spent on the second bus. And we'll see. I was just talking to the bus mechanic yesterday because he's also a big fan of old buses. And I said, I'd really like a D800, a flyer bus from the 70s. And he said, I think there's one. Yeah. We talked about one. We know if there's one. Well, if they ever give up on restoring it, maybe you and I can do it. And he said, yeah, I'll look for that. So my wife and my CFO will kill me if we buy a third bus.
Jordan Smith and I have been messaging back and forth lately where I keep saying, he's got that big Panther platform Ford, I think Crown Vic. And I want the Lincoln Town Car on that. Yeah. And I said, boy, I just put new tires on my 95 Cadillac and everything, but I really think I need one of those Panther. I probably got room in the yard for both. Can't decide if I want to sell the Cadillac and try to get one of those big Lincolns too. But yeah,
he's at least got space. I have a tiny lot in suburban Toronto. My lot is 1/10 of an acre. I've got room for like nothing. I also have a 1961 London taxi that's forever in the shop.
Wow.
When the guy actually finishes it, I don't know where I'm going to put it. I'm going to have to call. They have these car condos now. Like you buy this indoor parking spot. Yeah. I'll be buying a car. Like, what are you doing with our money this year, Jason? I'm taking a car condo to park this damn taxi.
I've seen those. I think some will even put it like in a clearish balloon.
Yeah.
Where it's the negative air. So like there'll no dust, that it's in like this big like balloon thing that sits in a parking garage.
For a taxi that cost me $5,000. No.
Well, kind of wrapping up here because I know Ray won't, we can talk forever, unfortunately. And we haven't even started talking about wrestling or TV shows yet. So before we get way off topic.
Well, I just got the steel cage from those old LGN figures.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, just arrived at the office today.
Oh, geez.
See, there we go, Ray. So back to the books. Back to the books and the new book that's coming out, Richard Longpre is the author of that. And you'll see I've got a half page in December's Model Railroad News. That's Jason and Richard holding the book up. So you get to see the author. And I think it'll be an awesome book. I love the book that Kevin Holland did for you, People Moving People. I'd highly recommend both those. You can get those direct through Rapido. Booksellers have them too, right? Like Ron's absolutely. Books, those kind of. So ask at your hobby or book dealer as well on those. And again, don't forget about that VIA Historical Association. But such neat stuff. I mean, Ray, this is the all around. When I talk, I mentioned to somebody today that asked me what I was doing today because it's 85 here somehow in late October. Said, you going rail fanning? I said, no, I can't go anywhere today. I'm recording with Ray Arnott and Jason Shron. Oh, man, out of everybody in the hobby, I would love to meet Jason sometime. I said, he is a lot of fun. I said, yeah, he is exactly as you see him in these kind of things. So, yeah.
Well, if this goes live before November 12th, we're having a 20th anniversary event near Toronto. If it's after November 12th, we had a great time.
No, this will air before November 12th, so we'll be able to share all that information as well.
Have your passports. Come on up to the Halton County Radial Railway. We're having a 20th anniversary, very low key bash. We're hopefully going to get some sounds out of the subway they have stored there. So because we have our first subway model coming out soon, so it'll be fun.
Awesome stuff. We'll share the links for all of these events, and of course, Jason's efforts to restore all of this equipment through their charity, Rapido Trains, where all the books, that'll all be on our website, aroundthelayout.com/130.
Well, Jason, thanks so much. It's always a pleasure talking to you. I love all the stuff that you do, whether like the VIA Historical Association producing books. When I win the lottery and I bring back all that Tyco tooling, I'm going to run the company just like you run Rapido.
Wonderful. I'll be right there with you. First of all, we'll all be knocking at your door after you win the lottery. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, it's been an absolute blast. I sat back and I got to listen to you guys, and Jason, your passion for passenger rail amongst all the other projects that you have going on. And oh, by the way, you run a model railroad business too. And It's absolutely amazing. I admire your energy, and I question where you get all this free time. But it's been an absolute blast for you to come and have you here on Around the Layout. So thanks for coming by.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's episode, check out past shows, and much more on our website, aroundthelayout.com. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at aroundthelayout.com/crew. Follow us on social media, aroundthelayout.com/social. And send us your feedback, aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us around the layout.